They don't want you to know about this hidden truth about poverty in America. For the past half century, the powers that be have cleverly concealed the shocking reality of poverty in the United States. The poverty rate has remained stagnant at around 11%, refusing to yield even a fraction of a percentage point. In 2019, a disheartening 11% of the American population was labeled as poor. Compare this to 1970, when just about 12% were in the same dire situation. There's no denying it, there's been no real improvement. Today, a staggering 37.9 million Americans are trapped in the clutches of poverty, making up a distressing 11.6% of the entire population. This dismal fact comes despite the United States proudly boasting the title of the world's wealthiest nation in terms of GDP. And if that wasn't perplexing enough, a hopping 11% of the federal budget, equivalent to an astonishing $665 billion, is allocated to economic security programs annually. But here's where it gets even more alarming. Child poverty alone is estimated to exact a devastating toll over $1 trillion on the United States, as per the latest research. So why can't we put an end to this crisis? One major reason lies in the undeniable presence of economic inequality. This sinister force continues to hold sway over the American dream, perpetuating the cycle of poverty for countless individuals and families. Economic inequality. Inequality is a big problem in the United States when it comes to getting rid of poverty. A recent study from the World Inequality Database shows that the richest 1% of people in the country make more than 30% of all the money. This means that there's a lot of money in the hands of a very few people, and it makes it hard to share resources fairly and help people who are poor. The gap between rich and poor is getting bigger in the USA. Some very wealthy people and big companies are making a ton of money, while a lot of people struggle to find good job opportunities. This concentration of wealth means that people in poverty don't have enough resources, and it's tough for them to improve their lives. In the past few decades, the pay for people with lower and middle incomes has not gone up much. At the same time, the cost of living keeps getting higher. This means that the difference between rich and poor is getting even bigger, and many families find it hard to afford important things like a place to live, healthcare, and education. Getting a good education is really important for moving up in the world and leaving poverty behind. But in the USA, the education system is not the same for everyone. Richer areas have better funded schools and more resources. This makes it hard for kids in disadvantaged areas to get a good education and breaks the cycle of poverty. Another problem is the high cost of living, which makes it tough for people to make ends meet and get out of poverty. High cost of living. Living in many big cities in the country makes it even harder for people to escape poverty. That's because in these places, you have to spend a lot of your money on things like housing, healthcare, and education. This means that it's really tough for families with low incomes to cover all their expenses. The problems of finding affordable housing and getting necessary services are still big issues that keep poverty going. The costs of basic things like a place to live, healthcare, education, and getting around are incredibly high. These high costs often push people and families into poverty, and once you're in, it's hard to get out. There's a big demand for housing, but there aren't enough homes for everyone, so the rent and property prices go up a lot. This makes it very difficult for people with low incomes to find a place to live that they can afford, and they end up spending a big part of their money on rent or mortgage. Healthcare in the USA is also super expensive. Getting good medical care can cost a lot, especially if you don't have good health insurance. This can lead to huge medical bills that are hard to pay, and many people end up falling below the poverty line because of these debts. Insufficient social safety nets. The United States doesn't have as strong of a safety net as many other advanced countries. There aren't comprehensive welfare systems like universal healthcare or strong unemployment benefits. This puts people who are vulnerable at a higher risk of falling into poverty or struggling to get out of it. A lot of people with low incomes can't get help from the safety net programs because the rules for who can get help are very strict, and there isn't enough money to go around. This means that a big part of the population doesn't have the support they need when they're going through tough financial times. Even when people do get help from these programs, the help might not be enough to cover their basic needs. For example, the money given out by welfare programs is often criticized for not being enough to lift people out of poverty. The safety net of the US is made up of different programs at the federal, state, and local levels. This can make things confusing for people who need help and can lead to problems with how the services are provided. Racial disparities. Racism is a big reason why poverty still affects many people in the United States. It's because of a history of racism that some groups of people don't have the same chances for a good education, jobs, and building wealth. To really make poverty go away, we have to fix these unfair differences and make things more equal for everyone. Educational inequality. Education is a powerful tool that can help people escape poverty and have a better life. But in the United States, many folks don't get good education. This article talks about how this unfairness in education makes poverty stick around and hurt people and communities. One of the biggest reasons for poverty in the USA is that there's a big difference in education. Poor neighborhoods often don't have the money, good teachers, and other things that make education great. Getting a good education helps you get better jobs and earn more money. But if you don't have good education, it's hard to find steady work, and that can keep you stuck in poverty. Moving up in society, we call it social mobility, is really important for getting rid of poverty. Studies show that if you're born poor, it's tough to get out of poverty. That means there aren't many chances to have a better life. To get rid of poverty, we need to break down the barriers that make it hard to move up, like the problems in education and not having enough money. Even though the United States is a rich country, it still has a lot of challenges to get rid of poverty. Things like not having enough money, unfair rules, and not enough chances to move up in society all keep poverty going. To really change this, we need to have big plans that make sure everyone gets a fair shot, equal chances, and help when they need it. This will make the USA a more fair and just place for everyone. Homeless crisis in USA. As more and more people are finding themselves without homes, many cities and states are making rules that say it's against the law to live in tents, cars, or sleep in public places. Over 100 places have had these rules for a long time, and recently, many places in the western US have passed new laws to deal with homelessness. In January 2022, federal data showed that 582,462 people didn't have a place to live. The cost of housing is going up, and this is making more people become homeless, especially in cities like New York and much of California. If we keep seeing more and more homeless people in public places, it'll be easier for city leaders to make laws that make it a crime to do basic things like sleeping and finding shelter. Advocates who support homeless people say that this is a big problem. Eric Tars, who works at the National Homelessness Law Center, says that as the housing situation gets worse, we'll see more people on the streets, and that could lead to more of these harsh laws.